Hi everyone, welcome to Konveyor community meeting. Today is May 16th. We abide by Konveyor code of conduct, which boils down to be nice to one another. And if you're interested, the code of conduct is linked at the top of the agenda. And in a second, I am going to share the agenda link in the chat. And please feel free to add yourself to the agenda. My name is Savita. I'm going to be your host today, and I'm just going to pause for a minute just to see if anyone wants to say hi, introduce themselves. Cool then. So moving on to the next topic, it's going to be an update from David. While he's getting set up, I'm just going to read the topic. It's going to be an update on the .NET provider on Windows.
Are you able to see my screen?
Yes.
Oh, look, I messed it up. Yeah, look. I'm not going to fix that now. I'm going to leave it. All right. So what I wanted to talk a little bit about today is just where we are with the .NET provider on Windows. And I subtitle, are we there yet? So talk a little bit about our vision for the future, where we're driving towards, and what we're going to accomplish in this release and subsequent releases. Just a quick rundown of how I'm going to cover it. I'm going to reiterate the why we're doing this, talk about what have we actually accomplished, what are we actively doing right now for V05, and I don't know if that's the second why are we doing this. And then the where are we now, quick demo, and like what's next. So it seems worth reiterating the point that there are a lot of enterprise users out there that have applications written in .NET, particularly like .NET Framework, and they're Windows only, and they want to be able to modernize to Linux and containers and Kubernetes and stuff, and so we want to make that possible for them. What have we done so far? So in Konveyor v04, we introduced the .NET external provider. So there were two use cases that solved. We had a provider that was a container for applications greater than .NET 5. So these were ones that are already cross-platform, and a link there to the Hello World example. And then it existed as a binary for Windows-only projects that were newer than .NET Framework 4.5, and a link to the example using Nerd Dinner. So there were no rules, and there was no real user experience to speak of. If you want to execute it in the 04, essentially you need to you have to start the container for the sufficiently new stuff, or you have to manually run a binary on a Windows host and point Contra to it or Konveyor to it, and it's not, there's no real experience to speak of. It's really cumbersome to get started. What are we doing now? So there's a bunch of stuff that we want to do for 05, and essentially that all boils down to making the provider actually accessible and usable for these Windows only projects. Quick, if I don't answer it later, this is important because a good solid percentage of the requests for this capability are Windows only projects. And so if we can't, if we need to provide a good experience for those projects that exist on Windows only. So a couple of things that we need to do to this. There's a PR that already exists in the Contra to enable overriding provider settings. So that makes it possible for that scenario of running the binary on a Windows host and telling Contra to, hey, go use that, go reach out to that provider. In addition to that, what we're trying to accomplish is to provide Windows container images for the .NET external provider, the analyzer, and Contra itself. And with that, when we enable Contra to be able to start and run Windows containers, then what we can do is we can actually provide an experience where on a Windows host, I can spin up a Windows container for these .NET Framework projects. In addition to that, we want to work on a rule set. So we have some rules that were provided to us, and we want to work on creating a path from a .NET Framework project to a .NET 8. And a stretch goal of this effort would be to actually take something like Nerd Dinner and bring it on into a Linux container and run it on a Kubernetes cluster. And then there's also the piece of actually taking that application and analysis and push it to the hub. Where are we right now? So the big things that we've done to date have been Windows container images for the analyzer and the .NET external provider. That doesn't seem like a lot, but what is being accomplished when we put the .NET external provider in a Windows container is we're drastically reducing the actual burden required to analyze a .NET Framework application. So you may have seen in previous demos when we talked about this, we had a very special Snowflake Windows host that we made a bunch of changes to make it so we could build the project. Then we were able to install the language server for C#, and we were able to start our provider, and everything worked. If we can get it running in a Windows container, then we can just put all of that in a Windows container and bring the project in and do the analysis. So while we're there, before I go into the demo, are there any questions so far? No questions? All right, so let's see if I can do a demo live and not break anything. Yeah. Are you able to see my screen?
Not so well. It's kind of small. That's good.
Well, now I can't see anything.
No winners here.
All right, well, I opened up the magnifier in Windows, and that was a terrible experience. Let me see, is there... I didn't think about this scenario where I'd want the font size. So there we go. That'll work for now. Are you able to see that better?
Yep.
All right. Here we are. All right. So on the right, what you can see is I have Docker run. Hey, look, it's not here. Let me show you. Working on Windows has been my favorite part of this. I didn't know. Now it's trying to fit it to that window. So what's happening in this command is we're running Docker, we're exposing the port, all that cool stuff. We're bind mounting in our Nerd Dinner application. You can see my path, Nerd Dinner MVC. So I'm bind mounting that path into it, and I'm running a .NET Windows. So we're working on publishing Windows containers, but that's a separate thing. So now I start this. To me, it actually accepts my keyboard input. There we go. All right. So now, in order to check this, what I need to do is find the port. So do the right number of zeros. There we go. All right. And if I So this is a pretty long command, but what we're doing here is we're running the analyzer LSP as a Windows container. We're bind mounting in the provider setting and the rule that we're running, and we're going to execute that. So if you see over here, we can see that we're actually talking, and it's actually loading the solution. Once it loads the solution, everything goes as we expect it to. And if I cat the output, you can see that we found the issues in the dinners controller. And that's consistent with what we've been demonstrating over the past few months now as we've talked about this. So I'll go back to the slides really quick and see if I can. So what we have planned for 05 is just to make it possible for what we want to get to is where I can run Contra directly on a Windows host like this and be able to spin up a Windows container and share that application into it and get the analysis output back. And in the future, beyond .NET or beyond the 05 time frame, what we're looking at is actually making this accessible from Konveyor. The idea there would be if Windows nodes existed in an OpenShift or Kubernetes cluster, how would you bring that workload into that Windows node and run that? But we're not quite there yet. So with that said, are there any questions? Yeah, it feels pretty simple, and it's a lot of what we've seen before, but getting it to run in a Windows container is a big deal as far as our capability to push this forward goes.
We're almost there.
Spoken like a manager. Alex?
Yes, so I'm yet not that familiar with the conveyor, but I have a question regarding the vision of the feature. It's like having a Windows container running the conveyor near the application in order to convert it.
So I would think of Konveyor as there's several pieces, and when we talk about the .NET external provider, we're talking about a very specific piece of the analysis capability. So in the typical case, we would start a Linux container with, say, a Java language server and the Java provider, and that application would be in there, and we would be able to interrogate it to see if any rules were broken. The Windows case is special in that it's the exact same thing, but on a Windows host. So this is not running Konveyor on Windows per se. It is only doing the necessary analysis piece on Windows. Does that make more sense? So Konveyor, the larger piece would be like the API server, the hub that everything talks to, where the application inventory exists. That is a separate piece, but connected piece to the actual analysis of an individual application.
Okay, I need to get into that because I don't want to waste anybody's time. I'll get into that a little bit deeper. Maybe I will understand the majority, and if not, I'll bring some questions.
Thank you.
And if you have some kind of workflow or drawing of a workflow step by step, or that could be very helpful.
That's all I've got.
Thank you, David. I look up for any of the architecture, any information available, and put it on the chat in a minute. And I just want to give a shout out to David for going through all the struggles to get the Windows container and stuff running so that we don't have to suffer. I appreciate it. So next up is from we have Sam. Sam's gonna talk about conveyor and crane.
Okay, so I don't have a slide deck for this. What I have is just kind of a proof of concept that I'll run through. Let me just see if I can share my screen here. It's always the final boss of presentations here is figuring that part out. Okay. Is this visible?
Yes.
Okay, great. So yeah, so this is a proof of concept for a platform-oriented analysis and asset generation story for migration of an application that's actually hosted in EKS. So what I have here is this guestbook application. This is basically the Kubernetes PHP guestbook example with some state in it. I've got it running in EKS. And that's not showing my terminal here. Hang on a second. There we go. Okay. So here's this application I've got running in EKS, which is 3 pods, their associated services, and their backing volumes. So what I'm going to do, you can see here, first of all, I just want to point out there's something new here in the application inventory at this new column for asset generation, which is going to come back up in a little bit. Well, what I'm going to start and do is analyze this application in terms of how it's deployed on its in EKS. So the hub's already been provided with the necessary credentials to access this. And what you're going to see here is that there's a new option for type of analysis for platform. And so I'm coming from basically a Kubernetes host here, and I want to migrate to OpenShift. And you're going to use this. I've got this for organizational purposes. I've got rule sets related to Crane, which is the tool that I'm going to use to help migrate. So this is just going to take a second to run here. And this is actually taking advantage of the multi-provider stuff that's not quite in yet. There's an enhancement to automatically select the right analysis providers based on the way that this application is tagged. So here I've got a platform EKS tag. Behind the scenes, it's choosing the correct EKS provider to go out and run this analysis with. This should just take a moment. I apologize. I'm doing this live. So it's just going to take a second to go through this. I'm happy to answer any questions during downtime. Maybe 1 second. I must have a bunch of pods running. Sorry, folks, just took my cluster a little while to get around to scheduling that pod. Should have memorized some jokes to tell while this was running.
Yep, that's a classic. Maybe you can reiterate what's happening now.
Yeah. So, all right, that's a good point. So what's happening behind the scenes here is this is using the EKS tag. The hub is choosing to run an EKS analysis provider, and it's running rule sets that are oriented to analyzing not the application source, but its deployed environment. So in this case, it's running two rule sets. One is based on the Kubescape best practices and security rule set, which is going to tell us things about security issues with the way the application is deployed in the cluster. And the other rule set is relating specifically to the Crane migration tool, which is going to give us advice about things that Crane might do in terms of transformations it's going to need to make to migrate the application from its source cluster to its destination cluster, as well as some manual actions we might need to take. Now, finally, that I've started talking, analysis is completed, and we're going to take a look here at the issues let's come up with. Okay, so we got a whole bunch of stuff here. So most of these are going to be from the Kubescape rule set, letting us know about issues with the way that we've deployed this. It's a bunch of bare pods they're not being managed by a deployment or anything, all kinds of issues. I've got containers running as root here. And if I take a look here at the affected applications, that's going to show me, yes, of course, the guestbook application. And all three of these pods are a problem. Normally, these are things that we would want to address before migration. And this would be useful even not in a migration scenario. You could use this to analyze the disposition of your deployed application just to make sure you're doing things the right way. Then over here, we've got a notice from Crane letting us know that some PVCs are going to need to be manually transferred. Because Crane can generate all the assets for us, but it's going to need manual intervention to actually deploy the PVCs to the destination cluster. So, both of these Redis pods here need their backing PVCs transferred. And we've got, of course, links to the Crane documentation and example command here letting us know what we're going to have to do. So another new thing here, as I mentioned, this asset generation column. What I can do now, I want to migrate now that I've done analysis and made any changes that I'm going to make. I have a new option in the menu here to generate assets. And now what this is going to do in the background is launch a pod that runs Crane, which is going to extract the resources that are running from the source EKS cluster. It's going to apply some transformations to those to make them suitable to the destination ROSA cluster. And then it's going to output them into the applications bucket in the hub, which I'm going to be able to then download as a tarball and apply to the destination cluster. I can take a look here. So this is just a quick link into the applications bucket where I can see that there's a number of generated resources here. Now, in the meantime, what I can do, just tricks up my sleeves here. This is the empty ROSA cluster. I'm going to go ahead and transfer the PVCs. Now, this does take, it's going to take about 2 minutes. so I can talk through some more, a little bit more about what it's doing. But at this point, I wonder if there might be any questions.
Could you tell us a little bit more about Cubescape?
Sure. Cubescape is a project from Arma Security to basically condense a number of different security-oriented rule sets, as well as best practices for application deployment. So it's got a rule sets to cover a huge array of stuff, from CVEs to just general best practices to hardening for containers. And thankfully, they publish a open source repository of the Rego rules that they use for their Cubescape tool. They publish that so we can pick it up.
And are those rules being executed by Cubescape itself, or are we executing them in our own engine?
Right. These are being executed in our own engine. So some of the output is slightly different. This is actually being executed by the Kubernetes provider that was demoed a few months ago, which is reaching out to the EKS cluster, pulling in the resources, and then running these Cubescape rules against it.
That's cool. Thank you.
And that's one thing about that Kubernetes provider, makes it really easy to pull in Rego rules, which are pretty common in the Kubernetes ecosystem, to pull in and do resource analysis with stuff that's already out there. This should just complete in really just a second here, and then we'll be able to apply the rest of the resources that are dependent on these PVCs being present in the environment. And, like I said, this isn't available yet. This is a kind of a preview of things to come. The next thing after this is going to be really a enhancement for the concept of platform awareness, what this really means. There's a number of assumptions, of course, that I've made for this proof of concept, things that are not exposed in the hub UI that I haven't shown you, like how a user is going to interact with platforms, how they're going to store the credentials for them, etc. These are the things that have to be fleshed out for this story. All right, so we're going to go ahead and download the resources and apply them now that those PVCs have been transferred. And we can take a look at the guest book running in the destination ROSA cluster. So, any questions about that? Okay. Well, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Sam. That was a cool demo. And if folks want to learn more about it, if you have any questions, feel free to post it on the Slack channel that we have, Konveyor, and also to the mailing list. Okay, now moving on to the next topic. We do have a couple of enhancements highlight listed there. Does anyone want to give like a one-line update or just on that?
I stuck those in there, even though they're not my enhancements. I think it's just the new ones that have come up in the past 2 weeks. The first is the .NET support for sorry, I'm trying to pull up the list. .NET provider for Contra, and then the second is that was submitted by David, and then one was submitted one for Gradle support within the analyzer itself. So I know we have some reviews already on the Gradle support one. I don't have any reviews on the .NET one. So looking for feedback there. And today's technically the enhancement freeze for 05. So I'm looking for feedback as soon as folks are willing to do so.
Thanks, Dylan. Right, so moving on to the open discussion, I think it's Dylan again.
Yes, it is. Maybe sorry, I didn't have the agenda up, and now I'm trying to pull it up so I can look at it. Maybe we can
Let me
share
just
our screen.
share the. Do you have the link to the agenda? Would you like me to share
I
it?
do. I have so
Okay.
many freaking windows open, and I lost it. And
I can share it if you just want to talk about it.
I found it. Thanks. Okay. Yeah, I'll go ahead and share my screen in case I need to pull up anything. This is embarrassing. I can't stand how much effort this is taking me just to share my screen. All right, so let's see. Open discussion. The first thing was today we are cutting the 040 release. I really just wanted to use this time. I know I installed the 04 alpha. I just ran through like a basic analysis. I didn't necessarily stress test it. I know we kind of had a call for everyone to do that at the last community meeting. Are there any concerns about cutting 040 today? So what this means is after this call's over, I'm going to cut a release 0.4 branches in every repository, and then we're going to trigger the workflow based on that branch. So I would ask that we don't merge anything in a main today, at least until I get the branches cut. And then we'll go ahead and cut that release, update the website, and go from there. Any concerns, questions? Okay. The good news is that CI is passing, so I made sure that we're in good shape there. I will run a CI test on the release branches as well before I do anything else. But I feel pretty good that we haven't broken anything since the alpha build. So with that, today is also the enhancement freeze for Konveyor 05. So we've got 4 enhancements up that are related to 05 milestone. In fact, why don't I just go and share my screen? We need to actually add the milestone on these 2 new ones. Right, so multi-language support in the hub, application insights, Gradle support, and Contra support for .NET. However, there was 2 other features that we intend to include in 05, and I spoke with Scott yesterday. He's graciously volunteered to submit the enhancements for them. I don't see a reason why we can't include them, even though we haven't actually submitted and accepted, because it's actually gone through mockups at this point. So I think there's been enough discussion to understand that we want to include it. The backend support exists, but Scott has offered to go through the formal enhancement process for it, which thank you very much, Scott. That's servicing the task manager in the UI. Again, we've already had the milestone on it, as well as basically enhancing the analysis details page to allow you to list and download the files for the task. So those will technically come in after the freeze, but it's really just formalizing the mockups we've already put together for them. I'm personally okay including them, but I just want to check if there's any concerns with that. If there's not, then the good news is that we actually have a release where we've stuck to the enhancement freeze, because every single feature we've listed will have an associated enhancement. So I think that's a good sign. And that's really all I had. So if there's no questions, comments, or concerns on that, that's it for me. Yeah, Melanie?
Hi, everyone. Just wanted to understand for .NET the high level plans of like for 04 and 05. Like in 04 we have .NET support via CLI, and what's going to be, I mean, without rules, if I understand correctly. And in 05,
No, in
no?
04, it does not work in Contra. So
Okay.
that's the enhancement that's listed right here for 05.
So just to be clear, you're going to go there and you're going to see that it's a draft, and I haven't filled it in completely yet. But the gist is, in 04, all we had was the provider. We had the binary and the container, and if you were clever enough to run it manually yourself, great. If you didn't and you relied on Contra or the web UI, there was no way for you. 05, the plan is to make a clear path for leveraging Contra to analyze .NET Framework applications.
Thank you for clarifying. Does UI support is planned to be added in 05 as well or not?
Not in 05, no, because the issue there is the Windows nodes and clusters and how the tasking would work in the hub to actually put stuff on those nodes. We're just not ready for that.
Okay, thanks. That's good to know.
Good questions. Thank you. Any other questions, comments, concerns on 04, 05? Okay, that's it for me.
Thank you, Dylan. All right, folks. Last call for open discussion items. If anyone has any open discussion items, it's the time to bring it up. In the meantime, I just want to give a shout out to David and Sam for the awesome demos today. Thank you. And all right, I don't see any other topics in the open discussion. So if you have any questions, comments, feedback on the announcements, feel free to add it in the announcement issues. It's all linked in the agenda. If you have any questions, oh, cool. Go ahead, Ellen.
Yeah, just one more thing I forgot to ask. David, like, is there any plan to write down the steps that there are for running the .NET in 04?
Yeah, it's in the two examples for the hello. There's a hello world example and there's a nerd dinner example, and they go step by step.
Okay, thank you.
I will try and find the link. No, I will probably put in the agenda later. I'm really bad at typing, talking, just to be on a recorded call. All right, so I will put that back in the chat, sorry, agenda once I find it. Or if David can find it, that'd be awesome. Cool. So if you have any topics, anything that you want to discuss, we have the Konveyor mailing list. We also have the Slack channel. Please feel free to post your questions and any feedback, any comments, welcome. And next week we have a Konveyor planning call and also an office hours. If you have any questions that you want to talk about analyzers, there is a call at 11:30 Eastern, 11:30 a.m. Eastern. And that's it for me. I will see you all in 2 weeks. Bye, everyone.
Bye.